Okay, so local legend has it. Zoo Boise began with a monkey that got loose from a traveling circus. You know, we looked into that story about a year ago, and the truth was inconclusive. However, as legendary as that story may be, there's another Zoo Boise story that has to do with a loose animal, which is even more infamous than the former. And it has to do with one of the largest cats on Earth. 25 years ago today, an annual fundraiser for Zoo Boise turned tragic. At the time, it was called Feast for the Beast. And that night, well, this day in Idaho history, that title unfortunately took on a whole new meaning.
It's the last way anybody wanted to see Zoo Boise's fundraiser Feast for the Beast end.
There's a viewing area at the back of the tiger cage where from time to time, that's my understanding, that people can go and watch the tigers come in and feed.
Police say a group of zoo patrons was doing just that when a tiger nudged open an unsecured door on the cage and headed straight for the crowd.
This might be a good time to introduce you to...
Can you see me?
One of those
Hi.
in the crowd. Yes, I got you.
Hey there.
And the reason?
Yeah, the 11th.
That night at the zoo
8/11
became the story of the moment. Well, if you don't mind, if I could take you back 25 years.
That's fine.
That summer, Jan Gold was a board member of Zoo Boise and one of hundreds at the zoo's largest fundraiser. Just before 9 p.m., she and several of her friends decided to see some animals.
And we walked around near where the tigers were, and we saw the manager walking by with a couple red buckets. And he said, "You want to watch the boys eat?" And sure.
So they walked into a hallway with 3 cages, but they noticed one was left open. Jan assumed the tigers would be directed into the 2 that were locked. She was wrong. As she reached to close the gate, she found herself within a stride of Taiga, an Amur tiger.
And so I started walking very slowly backwards, and I took, one step after another. And at one point, after a few steps, this was a mistake I made, but I didn't know at the time. I turned and looked forward. That's when he, with one claw, just brought me down. He reached onto my back, and his paws were so big that there was a snag mark behind each arm of mine where his claws got caught. Brought me to my elbows and knees, and then he walked over my back, and then he bit into my head. The sound of him biting into my head was terrible. He didn't break my skull, but he broke through my scalp, and as he closed his mouth, his teeth dragged along my scalp. And it was that sound that I thought, am I going to survive this? And at the time, the manager's panicking, and there was a policeman that was on duty covering this event.
That policeman,
the last person into the main part of the building,
was Boise PD Sergeant Rich Schnebley.
This wall of bodies was coming back towards me, and somebody said, "The gate's open, tiger's getting out."
As others rushed out, Schnebley rushed in.
I looked back, and there was Miss Gold.
The manager was yelling at the policeman to shoot him. Well, I can only look forward. I can't move because my head is in his mouth. Then 2 shots rang. At the second shot, he let go, dropped my head. I'm laying in a pool of my blood, and my head is looking toward the left, and I realize I see my leg, and I shouldn't see my leg at that angle.
Sergeant Schnebley would fire another shot to keep the other tiger from coming in and secure the cage. It was only when the EMTs arrived that Jan remembers first feeling the pain.
I mean, it was excruciating. I had my child natural. I'd do it 100 times before I go through that again.
At the hospital, there was already enough commotion over the circumstances.
We've had some animal attacks in the past, but tiger is one of the rarer ones that we would have to say around here.
However, x-rays would reveal an even more harmful injury.
Because that's when they realized there was a bullet in my leg.
Okay, so at the time, there was talk of it was a ricochet.
The second shot that was fired by the officer in an attempt to warn the tiger away from the woman struck the side of the cage, and it was a ricochet.
That was a ruse they were trying to create to say that. And I said, there's no way it was a ricochet. Hollow tip bullets wouldn't do the damage it did if it was on a ricochet.
An ombudsman report proved Jan correct, but the damage was done.
I have some permanent nerve damage, and my leg got rebuilt, and it ended up being rebuilt about an inch shorter than my right leg.
Back then, Jan put no fault toward Taiga, but even she was surprised when she learned of his passing almost 13 years later.
I had several friends from Idaho send me the article, and I was amazed at how sad I was. Well, we had this connection. Not that we ever acted on it ever again, but it was I felt a little sadness.
And believe it or not, attacked by a tiger and shot by a cop
Didn't I have enough stuff already happen to me? But
wouldn't be Jan's only brush with death.
well, I'm a very healthy person, but on April 25th this year, and in Boise, a very large tumor was taken out of my head.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
That is a big deal.
it is a very big deal. I mean, it was crazy. It was between the size of a tennis ball and a grapefruit. And I wasn't expected to be able to be independent. And I went to an independent or assisted living facility. And once I got off the pain meds and started doing all kinds of brain tests, puzzles, et cetera, and doing better than like 95% of the people doing them, I have now graduated from the assisted living and I'm just moving into an apartment right now. That's why this is like the best Zoom-worthy space at the moment.
Any ill will from that time?
No, none. I mean, stuff happens. We can't predict it. The only thing we can control is our attitude moving forward.
And Jan has a great attitude going forward. And she is a survivor, living now in Issaquah, Washington, to be closer to her son. She told us her friends and family noticed she was not herself for the past 3 years. In fact, they believed she was losing her faculties. So much so, they were going to move her into an assisted living facility at the age of 66. It was during a medical exam to get into that facility that her benign tumor was discovered. They removed it that night with a 4-hour surgery. Well, now she has a second scar on her scalp. Her biggest worry, though, just like with the first one, was how she was going to tell her son, because he was the one who helped her through the last near-death experience. Okay, so about that first one, the city covered her medical expenses, but Jan says she still gets severe cramps in her leg, and she sometimes suffers from PTSD. And that wasn't the only collateral damage. The zoo manager, David Wayne, was let go that November, with Boise mayor at the time, Brent Coles, calling the tiger attack, quote, the last straw. Wayne also apparently lied to investigators about what happened that night. As you heard, Tyga lived to the ripe old age of 15 when he had to be euthanized from kidney failure. Zoo Boise has just one Amur tiger left these days. That's 14-year-old Akasha. And their annual adult-oriented fundraiser is now called Zoo Boise, and that will be held this Friday at Zoo Boise.